Dr. Alex, welcome to Reasons to be Joyful. I have the biggest smile on my face because I have been trying to speak to you. I sound like a weird stalker.
I'm trying to get a hold of you. Banging on the door.
I know, there, outside, let me in. For such a long time. I thank you so much for what you do for young men, for everybody. And I love the fact that I get quoted you to me when I talk about certain things. They'll say, "Oh, have you ever met Dr. Alex? Oh, Alex George is like," and I wanted to pass that on to you because you are dearly loved.
That's very kind of you. Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And I love the premise of the podcast as well. I think we do need a little bit more of that in life where it's very easy to see all the kind of darkness, but I guess you've got to remember there's a lot of light as well. And at the moment, we do need those reasons to be joyful at times. So it's a brilliant idea. And I love a podcast. Clearly, I've been podcasting now for 6 or 7 years.
Yes, such a long time.
Fantastic format for this kind of conversation to have. It's one of the rare formats of media where you can have an honest, in-depth conversation that allows space for nuance, which often you don't have. That you presented across like almost every form of format. And I don't know what you think, but I think this podcast space is a brilliant one to have these kind of conversations.
Absolutely. And wonderfully, it's not edited and it's not all then put out. I mean, I've always loved live and I get from you that you are about being in the moment, which is something I believe so strongly, and I think a lot of people find very difficult. Obviously, in the past, you haven't found it so easy. But now, would you say, obviously, this is the beginning of a new year. I cannot bear, I'm sorry if you like it, but I'm going to be honest, I cannot bear the new year, new me, or the resolution.
The good news is I'm with you. I've always hated it. I think it just creates it's usually just becomes a stick that people can beat themselves with and say, well, look how bad I am. I think if you're going to do this kind of New Year's resolution, I think what you should do first is look at all the things that you've gone through, all the things that you have done, things that you're proud of yourself for and grateful for, and think I'll build 1% on that and do something a little different this year. But usually what people do is say, oh, I'm terrible on this, that, and the other, and they write a brand new list of all these different things that they beat themselves up for, and it just doesn't work. I mean, most of the studies into this show, it just doesn't work. It's not the way to kind of approach life, I think. No. It's just so, how can you start a year and say, right, I'm going to entirely change everything? And it's not the approach that I would take. I understand some people enjoy it. And I think if you're going to have a specific target, like this year, I haven't played the piano in 5 years. I'd love to pick up the piano again. That's great. I think that's a really measurable thing. But I think when you're going, right, new year, I'm going to the gym 8 times a week. I'm going to eat this diet that's like, God knows where we've got it from. I'm going to, make sure I walk 3 hours a day to kind of do this and that and the other. It just suddenly becomes something that's such a chore and a bore, really. It's no fun.
No fun. We all need fun. Goodness knows. But do you live in the moment? I believe very strongly in living in the moment because we can't do anything about yesterday. We're, a lot of people spend a lot of time thinking, oh, but if and when and how and when. Do you believe in living in the moment?
I do. I'm not always perfect at it. Ironically, I think a lot of the reasons that I've spent so much time in the space of mental fitness and the work that I do is because of my struggles, ironically, because I struggle sometimes to be in the moment. I was diagnosed recently with OCD, which I've actually been experiencing for probably 15 plus years and just not realized. I mean, often people go, how, or you could think easily, how can you not know? You're a doctor, you work in this space, but OCD is a very clever illness. It hides within your thoughts, and you always think it's the thing that you're worrying about, not that you have OCD. It tricks you into thinking there's always something you need to solve or fix. It lives on the what ifs, the what if you're wrong, or what if this happens? And it's a really difficult thing. And the antidote to OCD, as it is to anxiety and depression, is to be present, because of course those things live in the past and the future and in the possibility. Your breath, your heartbeat, your cells, all of your being can only live in the present. Like your breath is the great grounding element because it only exists in the moment. Whereas, the thoughts, the mind, can't. Like, your mind will not live in the moment. It's only clarity. It's only being in the present that can be in the moment. And that's hard. I think a lot of people's suffering is caused by the inability to come back to the present. I think the problem is a lot of modern life is pulling you into the future and past. It's a lot of like, this is what I need to do, and what if I don't do that? And, even social media is a premise. Social media only exists in the past. You're only ever looking at people's past and what's going on. And I think the world does pull you in that way. So learning to ground, learning to be in the present is very important, probably more now than ever. I think particularly with technology, you have to kind of learn to do it. It doesn't mean it's easy, but it's very important. And especially if you're someone like me who's got a critical mind, I'm neurodivergent with ADHD, plus potentially ASD. Starting my assessment at the moment. You've got to be able to get out of your head and into the body, I guess, into the present.
So for you, can we just talk about OCD? Because you say you were just recently diagnosed. So a lot of people think that's putting things in order, but it's not. That's the sort of simplistic way of looking at it, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the time we recognize things by what's most visual. So ADHD, the idea is that is a hyperactive young boy bouncing around the room, and it's because it's something to see. You notice the boy bouncing around the room, but about only 10% of people have external hyperactivity. A lot of people think it's just boys, but actually the split is about 50-50, maybe a slight lean towards boys or men in terms of ADHD. It's what people think it looks like rather than what it actually is. And with OCD, it's similar. You can see visually someone that's cleaning stuff all the time, or they're tidying their pencils, or they're checking the lock 50 times. You can see that. Whereas actually most OCD exists internally in the mind. So it's based around a framework of an obsession. So it can be an intrusive thought or trigger or something you worry about. It clings onto your fears. Being a good or bad person, whether you're going to get sick, whether someone else in your family is going to have something happen to them, whether something's going to go wrong, whether your life's going to fall apart. It'll have a fear that it attaches to. And then the compulsion part can be physical compulsions, but often it's rumination, thinking about it incessantly. Often it's fact checking. It's memory checking. It's reassurance, asking family members constantly, do you think I need to worry about this? Do you think I need to worry about this over and over and over again? And of course, reflection is a normal part of life, but reflection should be, I had a disagreement with someone at work yesterday. I probably was a bit cranky. I'll go tomorrow and say sorry about that and move on with my life. What OCD will go, oh, you were a bit rude to that person, you've apologized, but now we're going to think about it for the next 10 years and think that my entire person is attached to that moment. And that is the difference. So you should reflect and move on, but OCD isn't reflection, it's obsession, and it's compulsion around it. And a lot of people suffer from it. It's hugely underdiagnosed, because what's clever about OCD is that it says, no, there's no illness here. There's something to be afraid of. It's the what if. It makes you think that the thing you're worrying about is the problem, not the disease. And that's why it's difficult, because in essence, you lack insight. And it's very difficult to have insight into it. And even when you know you have OCD, it tricks you to think, but what about this time? What if you're wrong this time? So yes, it is a tricky thing. And actually OCD, what people often don't realize, is that it is actually a neurodevelopmental disorder in part. So I think what we've done over the years, and I think it will change, or our view of it is changing, is that we've tried to collect different symptoms like attention stuff, hyperactivity, into boxes, and some traits of autism into boxes, and some OCD traits, and dyslexia and dyspraxia traits. And in reality, people who are neurodivergent have a structural and physiological brain that sits out of the normal range, if you like, or the bell curve of normality. And those brains probably have more or less of different forms of those traits. So you might have, I've got some dyslexic traits, which I for a long time thought was dyslexic, but actually much of my reading and writing issues about attention, inattention to words, which my psychiatrist was teaching me about. But effectively, the brain often of a neurodivergent person will have features more or less of different parts of it. So the part of your brain, for example, that's affected by ADHD is also the part where OCD is prominent. So if you have a brain that is very attentive, hyper-focused, very sensitive, and you have a brain that is also quite obsessive and ruminates, then all of a sudden it's a perfect storm to build OCD. Like an ADHD brain is a perfect environment for OCD to thrive, because you have someone who hyper-focuses, doesn't have the best emotional regulation, and has high moral worries, or a high level of sensitivity, I guess. So it's really interesting. I mean, that's why, with the book Am I Normal, the reason I sat down to write the book that's coming out, depending when this comes out, it's in January the 15th. the reason I wanted to write that book was to kind of do the whole look back on my life and through the lens of the way that you assess ADHD, to kind of question like what part of it is me and what bit's the world, and how much of it's ADHD and what could be other things. Because I think a lot of people question themselves, like, am I normal? I think most people ask themselves that question.
I mean, obviously, it then throws me into having to ask, the whole thing about normal. I mean, growing up, everybody always said, oh, you're always jumping around. You're always so happy. All you want to do is be on television. Oh, do you ever sleep? And you start saying, well, what's normal? What is normal? There is no normal. I don't want somebody to say, I'm normal. I wouldn't like to be normal. Surely most people don't want to be normal, or do most people say, am I normal? Which which comes first?
So you generally ask the question, am I normal, if there's friction? So the reality is that every single brain is different. So if you look at scans and studies of the human brain, you compare like men and women, for example, there's often this idea, men and women have different brains. Largely, they don't, actually. The main structural difference between a man and a woman's brain is the size. A man's brain is about 10% bigger, and that's proportional to the body size. So that's obvious. Structurally, there's very little difference between a male and female brain. What happens as you go through life and you've got culture, and women are cultured to be a certain way and men are cultured to be another way, that creates difference in the brain later on. So society creates that difference. But also within men and within women, every brain is different. So everyone is different. And this idea of what's normal, well, there's no true zero line for that, but there is the bell curve. And the question of does it matter comes down to friction. So you being really happy and high energy is great for your life. It means you're a fantastic presenter and you love your life. So it doesn't matter is what I'm saying. Who cares, to be honest, in that situation? However, if you're someone that's also highly sensitive, but your sensitivity is not just being like a bit sensitive like lots of people are, it's crippling. You can't face rejection. You can't have relationships because you can't cope with any sort of dialogue or discourse around characteristics of yourself that are affecting the other person. You're not able to go for jobs because you can't cope with a line manager telling you you need to do better at something, that it wrecks every day. It affects your entire life. That is then not normal, because that sits outside the bell curve of normality. And that is what it comes down to. So, for example, in some ways, so I've got hyper interests in certain things, like I love motorcycles and cars. All my life I've been interested in those things to a huge degree, probably to a degree that's probably beyond what is like a normal person's interest or a normal level of interest in that thing. Does it cause a problem? Absolutely not. So I don't care. But my rejection sensitivity is off the scale bad, and that does affect every area of my life. So I do care. And in that area, that is where normality matters. Another example would be, is someone very extroverted or introverted? Well, it's only an issue if it causes you struggles. I mean, you mentioned just before we started this, you're working on the loneliness side. So if you're someone who's introverted that likes to only see people a couple of times a week and is perfectly happy, there's no issue there. But if the same set of interactions made you feel lonely, i.e. you don't have enough quality or quantity of connection, suddenly that's not normal because there's friction in your life. So what I've tried to do is look at my life and work out what areas are there friction and what areas are bits that I'm like, do you know what, I like the fact that I'm quirky and I'm different like that because that makes me different. So it's not about people having to worry about coming to the conclusion of normality in all these areas. I think it's more about identifying areas of friction and going, is this me? Or is this the world? And that is a very important second question to ask.
So it's not about judgment. It's not about other people judging you. It's about self-realization.
I think the greatest gift you can have is understanding yourself. I think most people go through life with way less awareness of themselves than they realize. I don't mean that in terms of walking around the Tesco aisles and being rude to people. I mean, they don't understand why they feel how they feel. They don't understand why friction occurs in their life, why they could always kind of have issues, say, in their relationships, or they never seem to be settled and at peace. They never feel content. Like, even from emotions. I mean, studies show that 95% of people have very, very low levels of emotional intelligence. And that's not something that they are born without. That's because we're not taught to have it. We're not taught as children how to understand the feeling you have in your body and your mind. Attribute where it comes from and know what to do with it. And the consequences of that is world wars. It's
heartbreaking that this doesn't
happen.
Within
families, it's suffering. like people are unable to recognize that. And that's because you never taught it. One of the greatest skills that you can learn as a human is emotional intelligence. Because if you have emotional intelligence, you can recognize your reaction to situations. You can name it accurately. Like you can say, I am feeling right now the emotion of frustration specifically. And I'm frustrated because I feel like this person I'm comparing myself to is doing better for the same amount of effort. And I feel really frustrated specifically by that. So what I'm going to do is not leave a hate comment or whatever it'll be on this person. I'm going to recognize the fact that there's comparison going on here. I'm going to bring myself to the awareness of the things that I'm grateful for and doing well. And instead, I'm going to think positively about this person and say, do you know what? I'm going to learn from you and fair play to you. That is an example of using emotional intelligence rather than letting that situation eat yourself up. Another one would be if you're with your partner and, someone gives them a bit of attention while you're out on a night out. Rather than having a huge argument and not being able to understand where this anger comes from, you go, oh, I'm feeling a bit jealous right now. I'm going to communicate well and say, hey, darling, I just want to let you know I feel a little bit jealous. You've done nothing wrong. I love you to bits, but I just want you to know I'm just feeling a bit jealous. And the response of emotional intelligence of that person would be, well, thank you so much for sharing that with me. I want to assure you how much I love you. It's funny that guy said hi to me, but you don't need to worry, darling. I love you to bits. Great emotional intelligence on both sides. But how often does that same scenario turn into a massive argument, massive upset in a situation where two people actually love each other and there was no actual wrongdoing? So emotional intelligence, I mean, look at it in world leaders, for example.
I was going to say that, yes.
How many current situations do we have right now that if people had a decent amount of therapy and emotional intelligence could be resolved very quickly? And that's an honest truth.
No, I absolutely agree with you. But when you were, that weirdly, that's exactly where I thought, because if those people that we're both thinking about had that at school and had it in the home, then all of this darkness and this fear and this hate that is out there at the moment hopefully wouldn't exist. But how can you change that? These people are in power now and it is frightening. Right. There's no two ways about it. And it's bleak and it's dark and it's frightening. And as I said, a lot of hate. But there are a lot of good people out there. But how do you make it happen in a younger generation? How do we get the young people not to end up like those particular men we're thinking about?
Yeah. Well, hatred is a very low emotional IQ thing. I mean, it's just like, it just shows low emotional capacity, because actually you need to move beyond hatred to find the other levels of emotion, to find peace. But even when you feel hatred, you should be able to recognize, where does this come from? And what do I need to unpick, rather than acting upon hatred? In general, if you act upon hatred, almost always it'll be a bad decision that you've made. And that's where the real world ramifications come from. Acting upon hatred is not going to lead to a good outcome for anyone. But the thing that needs to happen fundamentally is that we need to change our approach at schools. We learn about maths and English. I think they're important things, but so is learning about how to manage emotions. If you think about it this way, and my argument around building mental fitness at a young age and teaching at schools is that there is no aspect of your life that does not benefit when you have greater resilience and mental fitness. There's literally no aspect that doesn't benefit. And the opposite is true, that if someone has low mental fitness, they have lots of struggles and they've got low resilience, they haven't got the toolkits to deal with life, there is no part of their life that won't suffer. That includes, if you want to extend it to a non-moral area, you can look at the economy, for example, is going to be affected by it, the productivity. If you want to look at it from a workplace thing, but on a human and much more important level, the quality of life is going to be worse for those individuals. So what does that look like from a young age? It's teaching children to have a broad range of emotional literacy. So 100 to 150 words that they can kind of accurately assign to a feeling. Like, I am feeling jealousy right now. Or I'm feeling joy, the emotion of joy. What does that feel like? I'm feeling happiness. I'm feeling contentment. I'm feeling peace. What are the differences between all these words? And how do I recognize that feeling within myself? So teaching that at a young age, and then building as they grow. Okay, if I feel frustration, what are my next actions to use this emotion in a useful way? Because no emotion, and having said what I said about hatred and anger, no emotion should be demonized. All of them have a purpose, but it's what we do with that emotion that's really important. And building, that's what it is to be an emotionally intelligent person, is not living by emotions, but using your emotions to look at the meaning behind them and then act in a way that's according to actually your values and how you want to actually behave in situations. And that means that as children grow up, They can deal with disappointment, upset. They fail their exams. They recognize that feeling. They self-soothe. And they also bring in other help that they need, and then use that motivation, like I did when I failed my A levels, to then motivate myself to get the grades and go to med school and smash it. You if you use your emotions well, you can turn things like disappointment into powerful tools. But if you just live passively by your emotions, you will be missing out on a huge amount of opportunity actually in your life.
So, what about young people who go through trauma? And there is, obviously, you were relatively young, and the trauma that you went through was utterly heartbreaking. But for young people who go through trauma, whether it's a parent leaving or a parent dying or a friend at school, whatever it is, I don't need to list them. I think everybody knows what I mean.
Yeah.
How do you then help that young person to grow, to learn to feel okay about life in the future?
The reality of life is that we're dealt cards, many of them we don't choose. So people can be born into very good situations or very difficult situations. And talking about mental fitness and like the benefits of it isn't about ignoring the obviousness that people can be born into kind of really dire situations. And some of those situations are on a very extreme end. However, you can't choose the cards that you're given, but you can choose how you play and what you do with those cards. And, those cards might be not even be where you're born. It might be genetics. Like I'm born with, clearly looking at my family now, it's so funny, it kind of illuminates in your mind, clearly have the genetics within me of ADHD, probably ASD as well, and even actually look at the OCD stuff, and I kind of can see all of that. Like I didn't choose those genetics, but I now need to do something with this. Otherwise I enter that passiveness of life. And I think that's what you've got to avoid, I think in general, when it comes to health, is avoid entering that kind of passive, allowing life to happen through you and your health to just happen and go with life, rather than like grabbing it by the horns and taking a direction. And so, with a child or young person that's gone through something really difficult, it's not about going, oh, just forget about that and move on. It's about learning to live life with that thing. So, for example, I was an adult, but losing my brother at, what age was I actually? Because I'm 34, I'm 29, 30 when my brother died. I can't, there's no way you can get over that thing. I think often, I talk about in the book about grief. I think one of the big things that are not normal about the world is that we try and get over the death of people.
I agree.
And actually, and that grief, it can be grief, but it also can be trauma. So it can be a non-death related grief or trauma that's happened. That if something's really bad that's happened to you, the goal is not to kind of suddenly wake up and go, actually, it wasn't bad. Like it's just, and it's kind of what you're trying to do a lot of the time with grief. It's like sort of wake up and go, do you know what? I'm kind of cool with the fact my mum died. Like I'm actually fine with it now. I'm over it. But and that sounds crazy when I say it. But if you think of what society wants you to do, which is to get you to acceptance, and the idea of acceptance, you're at peace and you're okay with it, you're kind of saying that you want to be like, okay, that this horrible thing's happened. And when you try and do the impossible, you create friction internally. And this word friction is really important. I use it a lot because that is what we're talking about. It's one of the really good ways I think of seeing it, is that you get this inner turmoil and friction because you're trying to do something that's impossible. When you realize I don't need to get over the fact my brother died at 19 years old, what I need to do is to learn to live with, find some meaning from that, find some, use that for some kind of productive, I say productive is the wrong word, but use that energy, I guess, for positive means. Positive is the word I was looking for. And actually accept that I'm going to be sad about it for years to come. I'll probably still be 80 years old and be sad that my 19-year-old brother died. When you can learn to do that, you move away from the impossible into the possible, and the friction reduces, and you actually allow yourself to do what's human and natural, and that is to have a lifetime of grief. It is not abnormal to care and cry or feel sad and feel something about someone that died 30 years ago.
Do you know, I talk about it. I'm going to talk about it in my book. I know we're talking about your book, but in my book, I go on about that there are no rules to grief. And my mum died nearly 30 years ago, but I saw a film the other day and I was in tears. I had to then interview the star of the film, and it was all about a mother dying. And I started crying, and somebody in the room said, "Oh my word, your mum died ages ago." I said, "Yeah, but I don't stop feeling." You don't stop feeling.
I mean, that's a low emotional intelligence thing for someone to say. It's like saying, do you feel 30 years later that you're okay with the fact that your mum died? I'm okay with that. It doesn't bother you. I mean, if you think about it that way, it's just, Are you okay with it? Are you like, yeah, I'm fine with it?
No. My mum died she was very young. Like it's, and then you learn to, and I always say it's not, you don't get better. It's different. Life is different when you lose
learn
someone.
To live with the death of that person.
Yeah, exactly.
Not to move on. But the whole thing is like, as you know this, the stages of grief model was made around someone themselves going through the processes they went through to acceptance of themselves dying. But the problem is we've taken that model of grief and applied it to other people dying, which is where we've gone wrong. Even people themselves that are in terminal, and I lost a friend actually very sadly when I was younger who had cancer. Freya Barlow, she was a medical student, a wonderful person.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And she I don't know how much I can say, but I'm not sure that I believe even in those that are terminal that you follow the stages of grief model, let alone those who are living. I think exactly as you said. I think 30 years later, I think in 30 years I'll still be sad. I'll still think about it at times. But the difference is not letting it dominate your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I like that figure of 8 idea that you should kind of dip in and out of kind of nostalgia and some sadness around it and into living and in the present. And eventually you live a lot more time in the present. And then every now and then you dip into the other side of the figure 8 to kind of feel those emotions and like almost live within those emotions while you're there and then pop out again. The issue is, I guess, for people is when you've got a grief situation where you're stuck in a certain feeling. So if you are stuck in anger for 3 years, that's clearly something where you've got kind of stuckness. And I think stuckness is probably a focus, something to look for.
I love stuckness. Let's all use stuckness.
Yes. Yeah, let's use stuckness. It's definitely not like a good word in terms of the English dictionary, but I think
it works,
people relate to that feeling of like, I'm just in this like emotion. And we want to be able to kind of come in and out of those. So if you are like, I'm stuck in anger, then again, applying emotional intelligence is like, why do I feel angry? I need to dig into this and see why I'm stuck with this, because this emotion is telling me something that on a deeper level, I feel a level of injustice in some sense here. So working with a therapist, you can find out what that feeling is, because if you just ignore that emotion that's constantly flashing up in your head, the brain's saying, hey, you need to look at this, hey, you need to look at this, hey, you need to look at this, and you're just ignoring it, all that's happening. Like, in a car that has an alarm when you don't wear the seatbelt, where you don't wear the seatbelt, keeps pinging and pinging and pinging and pinging, it's not going to stop. So you need to look at that thing and work out what is there that's going on. And that's very different to dipping in and out of that feeling of, for example, at Christmas Day, thinking about your mother, as I'm sure you will, feeling sad in that moment, or even being happy, or even like a warm nostalgia about something, a memory that you have. You're probably going to feel emotions. That's normal. If you were stuck angry every day for 3 years, then that is something to dig into. So it's just working out like what's normal for you and what are you able to kind of continue your life with? What is going to hold me back versus what's going to empower me in my life?
When was the moment that you realized you wanted to help other people?
I think I've always been like this since I was little. I think I've always been the person that if someone fell over in the playground, I generally move towards things. I'm not saying that to sound like some kind of world savior, but
no, you don't sound like that. Just sound kind.
I'm kind of drawn towards problem solving, and I think it comes probably from my mum, my dad. My dad was a policeman, and I always saw him even from a young age, kind of like if there's a problem, he'd like step in and fix it. He was very much a problem solver. My mum was a huge empath, so she always said that you should try and help people. And, so I was brought up with that idea. And I think from a very young age, I kind of felt, I feel, and it's probably because of the ADHD, I feel a lot. I feel people's emotions. And if someone's sad, I'm sad. I really feel stuff a lot. And so I just kind of felt like moving towards people. And then I saw the combination of like science, which I think is pretty fun and cool, and helping people within A&E. And I got drawn to that. And obviously throughout the pandemic, I guess I felt like a duty in a sense. I was very much aware that I had the most followers of pretty much any doctor in the UK and one of the most in the world. And therefore, during a pandemic, I had a loud voice box to use to tell people what the hell was going on, basically. So I felt like duty is a weird word, but I did genuinely feel like I need to actually make sure that I've got to use this now. This is my time to do something positive. And then obviously since, actually even before using my brother, mental health has been something I've been talking about for years, well before My brother passed away. I think people are much more aware of it because I became mental health ambassador. But I went to Downing Street years before, actually, when Theresa May was there to talk about education at school. But obviously, since he passed away, like, it just became so loud. And then I was like, look, I know the pain that I've gone through losing a brother to suicide. I see the catastrophe and damage it's done to my parents. I want to have as few families go through that as possible, and if possible, no families go through it. And so that's why I've done it. But it is hard because even when I felt this huge pressure when I was mental health ambassador, because I was very aware that every day people continue to die, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of like, I'm supposed to be trying to help fix this thing. I never had the arrogance or ignorance or stupidity to think that I was going to be able to go in and sort it all out. However, you couldn't help feel a sense of like, again, duty, and you're like, should I be doing more? But eventually I realized that the best thing to do was to be really focused and clear about the things I wanted to change. So got funding towards mental health teams at schools, which was £80 million at the time. And now that it's gone on to secure a national rollout, which is important. And I worked on the early support hubs, which was in the Labour manifesto eventually, but they still haven't funded yet. So we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, I really at that time tried to kind of be focused. And I do the same now. I realize now that I can't help everyone. But if I share my story, and I think storytelling, and for example, what you do on this podcast, storytelling and narratives and sharing is incredibly powerful because it makes people feel seen. And for anyone listening who has suffered with mental illness, you'll know that being seen is probably one of the most transformative experiences, because the cruelty of mental illness is it makes you feel alone. And it's a deliberate thing, actually. A lot of people don't realize this, but depression deliberately isolates you. If you catch a virus, you get the flu, which is going around a lot at the moment. So if you haven't had the flu jab, I'd recommend it, because my friends that work in hospital are saying it's like the worst in 10 years.
Yes.
If you catch a virus, we are physiologically designed to isolate, to go to bed, to lie down, to go into the cave, stay away from people, and you don't have energy, you don't want to go outdoors. And that's a deliberate thing, not just for you to fight the infection, but to prevent you giving it to the rest of the herd, the rest of the tribe, the rest of the people. It's a design, it's a human protection design. The problem is with depression is it mimics a virus in that sense. So it tells you to isolate, stay alone, it's just you, don't move, stay still, stop, and if you look at people that are extremely depressed, they can't move. You call it catatonia, like a catatonic. You can't move. And because if you think about it this way, what is the cure for depression, or what is the antidote to depression? It is the opposite to what you do when you're depressed. Often if you're saying to someone, what do I do when I'm depressed? Ask yourself the question, what do I do when I'm happy? And that is what you should do. Don't act how you want to act when you're depressed. Act how you would act when you're happy. And that can be the hardest thing to do. But that's because you're fighting what the depression is telling you to do. But if you continue to do as the depression tells you, you'll only suffer further. And that's a hard truth to learn. And this is what's difficult with mental illness. Is like, for example, OCD. The cure to OCD is to sit with your discomfort, to sit with uncertainty, and to not do your compulsions, not do your rumination. So in essence, it's like having a broken leg and letting someone kind of bend it into place, even though it hurts really hard. So all mental illness has that unfortunate thing where most of the cures to it is doing what's really difficult.
Can we just talk about social media? Because obviously, I as far as I'm concerned, you use it for all the right reasons. I hopefully do, because I just want to spread joy. Other people, they're lovely. All the happy news and good news movements and all of that are wonderful.
Yeah.
But we obviously read, we learn so much about the toxic side of it. I suppose with adolescence bringing it to the forefront, which was a brilliant drama. But how do you want young people to see, use, be a part of social media? Because it's there. There's nothing we can do about it. It's there. I think it's wonderful that some schools take it away from young people, in school time. I love the idea that they actually go outside and they talk. You and I both love
I think it should be banned at schools. I'm absolutely on board with the idea of up to 16 years old. It's just banned at schools. I think there's a reasonable argument for, I can see that, I'm not saying it's definitely the right thing to do. I think I can see the discourse for managing access to socials to a certain age. I can see the discourse around that. I don't know. I think we need to follow the evidence, really. And I think in a sense, Australia are doing that. I think we should look at the evidence and the emergence of that as to whether that actually works and what the end result of that is. Because what you don't want to do is isolate communities, and that's something to be careful of. But equally, I also think that, particularly in a school setting, like what purpose is there for being on your phone or social media at school? It's just clearly not beneficial in any
having a conversation face to face and getting outside and walking, getting dirty, all of those things for young people.
But the truth is that if you look at the studies, that there is many good things about social media as there is bad.
Yeah.
And much more what we're learning now is how we use social media is actually the most important thing. So again, it's almost like the mental health stuff. Just don't be passive. Don't have those apps on your phone and just allow your brain and your behavior to just engage with them without boundaries and control. Every person should have a screen timer that is strict. Otherwise, you'll end up like the average 25-year-old who spends 6 hours a day on
6 hours?
The average 25-year-old spends 6 hours a day. So if you think 8 hours for sleeping, 8 hours at school or work, you've got 8 hours left. So 6 out of 8 hours are on that. And I think one of the big things that people don't talk about enough, they talk about the negative effects of social media. What they don't talk about is the displacement effect. And the displacement effect is all the stuff you would be doing if you were not on your phone that you no longer do. Being outdoors, as you said, which is one of the biggest cures for all depression, I think, all sadness and things. The best way to be all creative and happy is to be outdoor. Being with friends, playing, exercise, talking with your mum, helping with the cooking, joking around with your dad, whatever it is. All that stuff that you were doing is now being replaced by that. So what can you do with 2 hours a day? By the time you eat and shower and change, what else are you doing if you're spending 6 hours a day on your phone? So the biggest tip that I say everyone should do, if you're listening to this and you do not have a screen timer on your phone, please go on your phone and set up a screen timer. Set up 2 hours a day, whatever it is you want to do, and be rigid with that. Because if not, you're just passive and you cannot beat the tech. The tech, I'm sorry, is built to captivate you. You cannot beat it. You can only beat tech with tech. The other things I would say is just make sure you ask yourself why you use things. If you've got TikTok, what is the reason you spend time on TikTok? Is it to laugh? Okay, if that's the reason why you're on TikTok, make sure the things you're seeing make you laugh. Sounds ridiculous, but loads of people say, I have TikTok to have a laugh. But then when you look at the feeds, it's all like depressing news and horrible stuff and triggering. So curate your feed. Control who you follow. Unfollow people that don't make you happy. If you've got a friend that kind of annoys you and posts stuff, mute them so they don't know that you've done that if you don't want to unfollow them. Really control. Like social media should be your control. And I think if it doesn't serve you, get rid of it. A good example is I deleted Twitter years ago, well before it was cool to delete it. I deleted it many years ago. I think it was right at the start of the pandemic I deleted it because I just find it a toxic place. Yes. I had like 300,000 or 400,000 followers. My management team were probably like, don't delete it. I said, I don't care. My mental health is more important. I don't like the discourse on there. Gone.
Good for you. I agree.
So I think you've got to, and some people actually delete it altogether, and that's fair enough. You don't have to be on social media. If you don't like it, get rid of it. But I do think in the reality of it, what we need to do is to educate schools about social media and technology, including AI, because whether you like AI or not, it's here and it's not going.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we need to really, if you look at what has to happen at school, is that we've got a Victorian school system that is outdated by decades, not even a few years. We need to fast forward that school system to teach about mental health, to teach about social media use, to teach about AI, to teach about financial health. It baffles me that the number one cause of anxiety in adults is financial worries. And yet, does anyone learn anything at all about finances at school? Why do we not teach finances in maths? Why is not 30% of the maths curriculum about finances? What is national insurance? What are tax contributions?
I couldn't agree with you more. Honestly,
what's inflation? Most adults, and I'm not being rude, but most adults couldn't explain what inflation is and how interest, like what does the Bank of England do? What's an interest rate? What's a mortgage? What's an APR? Like most of these things that are actually very basic financial literacy, most people can't, and that isn't their fault. Just like emotional literacy, you're not born with this knowledge. So if no one's taught you, you are not going to. I opened my first paycheck as a doctor, and I had no idea what a paycheck, how it really looked. I'd always done like cash in hand jobs at school and all that kind of stuff, and really understood it. And when I had a paycheck for a while at Tesco, I just couldn't even understand what the words meant, so I didn't even have a look at it.
Yeah, it's like me in my paper shop on a Saturday.
I was a teenager, and I was like, I can't even so just chucked it away. Never even opened it after the first paycheck, because I don't understand it anyway. And anyway, when I opened it as a doctor, I saw the word national insurance. I literally thought, like, there must be a mistake here. I am the national insurance. What do you mean you pay 13% or whatever it was in national insurance? But that's stuff that you should be taught. So I think there needs to be a massive overhaul, because at the moment we have a Victorian system that's as obsessed with academia, and yet by the main metric. So if you think that academic outcomes is the number one metric, let's be frank, that we care about with our schools in this system, not the teachers, but what we set out in the schools.
Not me. I don't agree with it.
We're below average in Europe.
Yeah.
We are not. So the thing that we are in Europe, we're one of the most academic systems, and then even by that metric, we perform average or even worse. And then if you look at the mental health metrics, we're terrible. We're doing so badly. Look at places like Finland. Learn through play, all about building teams younger, emotional literacy, teamwork skills, resilience, mental health, being in nature, sports, learn through play, all that stuff happens. And they bring learning in slightly later. And by learning, I mean like the academic learning. They score better than us in every academic outcome, and they have happier, healthier children.
I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you. I mean, I was very lucky. I mean, I remember there were lessons in school. We had to do lessons outside. Some of the lessons even whatever the weather, we had to do it outside. Brilliant. And we never got graded. We never were told who was better or worse or top or bottom of the class. Yeah. That is something I think is vital. I can't believe that it still happens today. Can we just talk about the word kind? And kindness, because it's really when I told a few friends the other day that I was with, that I said, at last I would like Dr. Alex, and they all work in telly, these people, and they all love you. And they were laughing about my reaction. I was like a child. I was going, I can't wait. And they said, what are you going to ask him? I said, so much I want to talk to him about. I want to ask him what he thinks about kindness as a word. So I'm going to do it, because that's what I was thinking the other night out for dinner. So there is really weird. I put up a post on social media about being kind, and everybody, which is very lovely, agree. But then you get some, and I delete them, that say, I'm so bored of the word kindness. What does kind anyway? Nobody's kind. Yeah. And I know that's about their stuff. Yes. But I don't want to spread that negativity.
Yeah, I get it.
But so can I ask you about being kind and kindness, please?
The biggest antidotes to suffering is kindness. If you look at, if you're depressed, if you're struggling, if you're lost in life and you're searching for any purpose or meaning, move towards kindness, because it is actually, and this is science, it is a drug. And actually, kindness is kind of selfish, because when you're kind to someone else and you do something for someone else, you get this explosion of oxytocin in your brain and dopamine and serotonin, and you have this amazing, warm sense of purpose and being in your life, because you have helped someone else. So oddly, it's a double win. When you're kind to someone, you're doing something kind, you're helping them, but you're actually helping yourself. And, I think there's a lot of movement now within actual mental health treatment to kind of encourage people because again, depression isolates you, moves you away from people, looking for connection in places where you can help others. And kindness doesn't have to be necessarily about, is it great to, volunteer for like Age UK or whatever it might be, or like local kind of food bank, etc. But actually, it can be the simple stuff about who you're kind to in your own life, smiling at the bus driver, having a chat with a person serving you the coffee in the morning.
Speaking my language.
Little things, like when you walk past someone in the park, rather than the typical London thing, we just go smile and say good morning. Like this morning was a beautiful day.
I do it every day.
And it helps. I got the dog Rolo, but every I walk past, they look at it, I go, hey, how are you? Morning. And that's just a simple thing. And when you smile at someone, sometimes I often think this. It's actually happened to me once. I remember it specifically. It's a really bad day, and I was like, oh God, I feel really miserable. And I was walking, and this person just gave me like a really warm smile and said, have a good day. Or I can't remember what the quote said, but this big smile. And I just, this person gave me a really warm smile, and like it just lifted my mindset a little bit. And I was like, oh, there's goodness out there. And sometimes that's all we need. And in a world where there's so much kind of negativity, and the news, that I think the news channels are just like contributing so much to people's kind of anhedonia and just fed upness, I think you've got to look for those opportunities to be kind. I think it's life-changing. And actually, to be honest, the thing, like I think I really actually miss about working in A&E, partly is the kind of the adrenaline side of it and all that stuff. But the big thing I miss really is that is a direct way that I could be kind multiple times a day. You were doing something where you were helping someone else. And I would often go to A&E and just be like, stuff outside of work would be bringing me down. And I'd do a shift there. And really, like, you think, how could you feel good? Because you're seeing so many people that are sick and going through difficult stuff. But I'd often leave feeling really good, and I'd feel grounded. I'd realize that lots of other people have got suffering and challenges that you're not aware of. The word Sonder, I think, is very powerful for that reason. But also, you just feel so much better because you think, no matter what I'm going through, me being here has been worthwhile. Like, even if life is a bit difficult right now, it's worthwhile being alive and here because I'm able to do something good for someone else.
Oh, I totally agree. Can I? Okay, we're just two brief things, if I may. Will you? I know it's a really cruel thing to do. It's cruel. Will you make me a promise that you and I will go for a walk together and smile and say good morning to as many people as we possibly can? Can we do it?
We'll have a walk around the park, coffee in hand.
Perfect. Because I do it to people, and they sometimes go, "Whoa!" But I've got to 120. That's my maximum in a day.
That's really good.
But the 120 is people saying it back. So I say hello or I smile, and I've got to 120. I have a little shot. It's something I want everyone to do.
If you do it in London as well, I'll do it somewhere in a city, like in Manchester or something, where typically, I know up north they say people are more friendly, but even in cities anywhere, people tend to be more kind of head down. You'll find that 9 times out of 10, they not only respond, but they respond with a smile.
They do smile. They smile.
It's a natural human reaction that when someone shows an interest in you and shows a basic kindness, it triggers a response within them.
It's wonderful.
It's not, they've not put that smile on to try and be, they react with warmth immediately. 9 times out of 10.
Right. So we're going to do that. You said I promise. It's been right there. We got it. Okay.
You got it on record. So
cannot wait for that. And lastly, I just want to ask, what brings you most joy? Is there something? Is there a particular thing? Is there something you have? Is there an item in your life? What brings you joy?
It's probably kind of it's kind of, I say it's funny, but it's been the same since I was very small. So one of the things that for people in neurodivergent is often you'll have like sensory stuff that kind of relaxes you. And obviously I didn't know I had ADHD till the age of like 31, but from when I was little, when I was very little, I didn't sleep, and I'd only really sleep when my mum was drying her hair. And as a small child, then I'd find that like the hairdryer noise being on would really relax me. That's the white noise, I guess. And then from the age of like 6 or 7, I would sit before school for like 20 minutes and just put the hairdryer on to relax. I know it sounds really funny, but I just really relax. And after school, I do the same. And I am now 34 years old, and I still have the hairdryer on to kind of relax and calm me. So I've got my hairdryer by me to show you.
Love that.
So I use one, and I've got a tattoo on my arm of a hairdryer to kind of have a bit of fun with it. But all these years later, nothing has changed. And everyone that knows me knows that like that's his thing. Like if I'm stressed, I'll sit down and it just relaxes me and calms my mind. And that's a good example, going back to what we said earlier on, not normal. A lot of people say that's a bit weird, but it doesn't cause anyone any harm.
I don't think it's weird.
I don't care. It is what it is. So, I mean, I own it, and I'm telling you and all the people that are listening, I think you've got to find the stuff that works for you, and your toolkit for life could be very different to someone else's. In fact, I guarantee it will be, but that's okay. And that's why it goes back to that point of understanding yourself and accepting yourself is the most powerful thing you'll ever do. I don't think you can find peace in life until you truly accept yourself. And then lots of people try and mask that with alcohol, with all these different things, with distraction, with work, with sex, whatever it will be. Until you find the self-acceptance, you'll never be at peace.
Perfect place to stop.
Gaby Roslin.